all of us were talked about in the gospel today. Did you hear yourself being described? You and I and everyone who would be here right now would definitely be one of three things. Either a plower, or a merchant, or a fish. Each of them is different, but none is better than another. But knowing which one we are helps us to figure out how to find that treasure that Jesus is talking about today. Let's go through them one by one. First, the plowers. If you are a plower, it means that you were raised in church. It might have been this church. Plowers come to church because it's what we do. Plowers don't think about what should I do on Sunday morning. Going to church is part of the deal. When I am getting ready for an upcoming funeral and I'm meeting with a family, I'll often meet plowers. And I always know they're plowers when they say things like, oh yeah, my old man, if you didn't have a fever over 102, you were in that pew. If you are a plower, you probably have a pew. It's maybe by that column over there, it's 3/4 of the way back on this side, whatever it is. There's probably a place where you sit. That's something that plowers do. But if we hear what Jesus is talking about with plowers, he said plowers plow along until their blade gets caught on something. And if you're a plower, your blade might get caught on a moment of the consecration one day, unexpectedly, or a few words of a homily. And all of a sudden, you can't plow anymore. You're caught. And you have to go down and look at what is holding the blade. And often, after that happens, within a couple of weeks, people make an appointment with me. They call up and they say, can I talk to you, Father? And then I get to hear the wonderful stories. They say things like, I don't know, I've been going to church my whole life, but a couple of weeks ago, something happened. I don't know how to describe it, but I'm in a new place and I want to talk about it. Are you a plower? You may be a merchant. Jesus describes these people as the ones who go market to market looking for the great pearl. They know there's a great pearl out there and they are going to search for it. These people are different than the plowers because there's a good chance they did not grow up in this church, or maybe in any church, or maybe they've spent a lot of time in different churches. They're going market to market, looking for the pearl. Another word for a merchant is a seeker. As you know, we've been making a big deal out of our new mission statement here at St. Mary's because it really helps guide us in our decision making. And St. Patrick's is also developing a new mission statement that's being unveiled just before their 100th anniversary this fall, but I can give you a little preview. Their mission statement's different than ours because they're a different parish. The St. Patrick's mission statement says, we embrace those seeking a spiritual home, we reach out to those in need, and we grow our parish through the involvement of youth. That's their new focus for the next 5 years. The first thing is that we embrace those seeking a spiritual home. Those are the merchants. We create a place so that when the merchants come in, rather than say, hey, that's my pew, we say, oh, welcome, you're looking for the pearl. Great, it's here. Last Easter, we had the joy of having 5 people be fully initiated in the Catholic faith. And of the 5, 3 of them were merchants. One of them had been going to churches his whole life, seeking the fullness of what he was looking for, and found it when he was here. And of course, Seth and Roberta started off Jewish and found their way through life to this place where they found the pearl that they were willing to give up everything else for. Are you a merchant? A seeker? The last category is the fish. The fish are different. They're not plowers and they're not merchants. The fish never planned to be here. Sometimes they can't believe they're here now. The reason the fish are here is because they were going through life and then something hit them hard. Maybe it was a brutal divorce. Maybe it was a terrible loss. Maybe it was wrestling with addiction. But whatever it was, something happened that brought them lower than they'd ever gone before. And when they were feeling as close to rock bottom as they ever had, suddenly they were scooped up and slammed on the deck of the ship. And they looked around and they couldn't believe it, but they were here. In a parish I served in earlier in my life, I met a woman who was in a wheelchair, and I got to hear her story. Years before, she had been driving drunk and gotten into an accident that left her paralyzed. And she blamed God. She hated God for what happened. And she vowed to never go to church. And I got to hear her say, I swore that I would never step foot in a church again as long as I lived. She said from her wheelchair, and I kept my word, I never did. I wheeled in. And she said, I would love to walk again. Sometimes I have dreams at night that I can walk, and when I wake up, I'm so disappointed that it was just a dream. She said, but if I had to give up all that I learned to be able to walk again, I wouldn't do it. It's too valuable. I love talking to fish because their faith is just so real. They came here because they had to. Are you a fish? Have you been able to identify which group describes you? You wouldn't be here if you weren't one of them. A plower, a merchant, or a fish. But then the question is, have you found the treasure yet? There is an attitude that we can adopt that can help us discover the treasure if we're still seeking it. And a mentor teacher taught me this attitude. She had a curious habit with pronouns. She never used, in regards to her career, the word my. She didn't say my students, she said the students. She didn't say my classroom, she would say the classroom where I teach. And she told me, I don't want to believe the lie that all of this is mine. I'm just here to serve for a while. I am not going to outlast this school. The school will be here long after I'm gone. I might get a new job, or I might be transferred by the principal to another room down the hall. So she never used the word my. She felt it was more honest and more humble to admit that she was there to serve and it didn't belong to her. So I have tried to live that in my life. I don't always do it perfectly, but I try not to say my church or my staff, because they're not mine, they're God's. And St. Mary's is going to long outlive me. So maybe we could consider starting to be careful with that word, even with our lives. How common is it to say, my life? I choose to do what I wish with my life, or no one's going to tell me how to live my life. But when we talk about life that way, it sounds like a possession, like my car. But that's really not the truth, is it? None of us summoned ourselves here. We can't do with our life whatever we want. A lot of times we think that life is our possession, my life. But think about it. Really, life possesses us. It's like life is the dancer, and each of us is a dance. And life dances in us, and then when the time comes, life moves on and dances elsewhere. We don't stop existing. Life doesn't end when we die. That's our belief. Death is not the opposite of life. Life has no opposite. So perhaps we can make ourselves more available for discovering the treasure by giving up the idea, the false notion, that we're the subject and life is the object. Life is the one who possesses us. So here's the great news. You may be a plower. You may be a merchant. You may be a fish. But whatever you are, each of those groups share the most important thing in common. They are exposed to a treasure more valuable than anything else. And each group is on a head-on collision course with God.